Okay, here we are. Part two of the Marvel Netflix catch-up. Hopefully these things won't be coming out once every 2 weeks. I'm going to try to get them out on a bit more of a regular basis. It's just with everything that's been going on, it got away from me a little bit. So anyway, we're starting off with episode 3 of Luke Cage, Who's Going to Take the Weight? This basically kind of takes place mostly in flashback as we open up with Luke basically emerging from causing some havoc at the Crispus Attucks Center, which is where Mariah is based out of, but mainly it's also the main financial holding place for Cottonmouth and his group. We kind of, like I said, it's told mainly in flashback. We get a little bit of it. Luke visiting Pops' body in the morgue, well, not quite the morgue, at the funeral home. It turns out that Cottonmouth has stepped up and actually willing to pay for the funeral, as he did not condone what had happened, or the shooting that had happened in the previous episode. We then get, of course, it turns out later on that no, Cottonmouth did not pay for the funeral. He paid for the body to be disposed of, so it couldn't be traced back to him, even though everyone kind of knows that he's the one responsible for it. Anyway, Luke goes back to the barber shop. He finds Pop's old business partner, an accountant, there as well. And the accountant basically says, like, look, you're going to need about $80,000 to keep this place open. I mean, it's just at least for the lease. It's not even taking into account the damage from the shootout. Basically, Luke decides to go after Cottonmouth's underlings to try to scrounge up the $80,000 needed. As this is happening, Misty is interrogating Chico, who really doesn't want to talk. He says, look, the guy who's behind all of this is dead. Cottonmouth has his money back. Yeah, I mean, I hate that Pops is dead, but the streets will find their own sense of justice. And that's sort of what happens there. Just a sec. It's then not too long afterwards, though, that Luke goes to visit Chico, and Chico's kind of pieced together that Luke has powers. Obviously he knew that the bullets were bouncing off of him. He even says that, one of those bullets could have ricocheted off of you and hit Pops. But he sort of directs Luke to the Crispus Attucks Center, where Cottonmouth has been beefing up his security, because Luke has been going after these underlings, not taking any money, but basically sort of sending a message saying, I'm coming for the money. So Cottonmouth has beefed up everything and has put a big stake in, basically he's moved everything to the Crispus Attucks Center, much to Mariah's chagrin. Cottonmouth then has a meeting with the Puerto Rican mafia, who basically say, like, Diamondback has been hip to what's been going on here, and he's not pleased. Diamondback is going to be appearing later on, obviously. We then return to where Luke has wreaked all the havoc at the Attucks Center. He's popped up on a closed circuit video, and Misty Knight sort of recognizes him. She's kind of starting to piece together what's been going on, but this gets interrupted by a call from Chico, and Misty Knight's partner, Raphael Scarf, who's appeared in the first 2 episodes, but he hasn't been very prominent until just now, basically goes to pick Chico up. Of course, it turns out he's on Cottonmouth's payroll, and he gets Chico to basically sell Luke out, and then he sells Luke Cage out, and then Raphael proceeds to give the information to Diamondback, including where Luke Cage lives. Meanwhile, Luke has paid off everything that needs to be paid off. He's paying off the extra rent he owes to his landlady above the Chinese restaurant, at the Chinese restaurant that he lives above. And as this is happening, Cottonmouth basically fires a rocket launcher at the restaurant and blows it up. And that leads into episode 4, Step Into the Arena, which basically retells the origin of Luke Cage, how he was in prison. Now, they have tweaked a little bit. In this case, they use his real name of Carl Lucas, but Carl Lucas is a former cop in this scenario. He was not in the comics. But other than that, it pretty much goes beat for beat. He's in prison, and he's in prison in Georgia, and basically a guard there sort of coerces him into joining this fighting tournament, even though he's actually been going to a counseling session, and he's been bonding with the counselor named Reva Connors, who is eventually Luke Cage's wife, who, you know, gets killed by Jessica Jones while she's under the thrall of the Purple Man. But anyway, the guard named Rackham basically coerces Luke into, like I said, joining this fight ring that has been happening around here. And without getting too much into it, Luke starts doing really well, but he's really trying to use this as a plot to maybe work his way out of prison. It doesn't quite go that way as Shades, who's also in jail with Luke, or Carl Lucas in this case, I'll just be referring to him as Luke, basically turns on him, beats him up, and he winds up in... There's rumors of experiments that have been going on that the prison's infirmary doctor has been conducting, and it turns out that pretty much everyone involved in this has died. Everyone who has lost a fight in the underground fighting tournament has died, and Luke is then placed into it. It's at this point that Rackham intercedes and says, no, we have to make sure he dies, and cranks the thing all the way up. It then explodes, killing both the doctor and Rackham, but Luke emerges with unbreakable skin, and at this point you get a nice little, you get a few more touchbacks in the comics. As he emerges, he has this sort of metal crown that is reminiscent to the infamous tiara that Luke Cage wore in his early days, and he then also dons the famed yellow shirt and purple pants as well. Unfortunately, one of the things they don't mention is that one of the things that why these the basis for the experiments was it was to help healing and regeneration. Not really. In the comics, it's actually part of the Super Soldier program. Like, one of the many, many times they tried to recreate the Captain America Super Soldier serum. I think Luke was actually Luke Cage's, I think, the fifth or sixth attempt. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, when you hear of Wolverine joining the Weapon X program, it was later revealed that that was not Weapon X, but actually Weapon 10, the Roman numeral. It's been every attempt to recreate the Super Soldier Serum since Weapon 1, which was Captain America. There have been a few other ones in there. Phantom X, the mutant assassin with dissociative identity disorder, is one of them. I'm trying to think who the other ones are. Like I said, Luke Cage is one of them. I think there's a couple other ones. I think Deadpool is part of it as well. As Luke Cage discovers he has powers, he has his first utterance of Sweet Christmas. He then breaks out of the prison, swims away. Everyone thinks that Carl Lucas is dead, so that's why he winds up changing his name and leaving with Reva Connors. Returning back to the present, like I said, we've been jumping back and forth from past to present in all of this. Luke is underneath all the rubble. He finds his landlady. Her leg is pinned, and he sort of he demonstrates more of his strength and his abilities in front of her, and she says, you're going to need to start explaining this at some point. This kind of causes more and more flashbacks. Misty Knight is also kind of been piecing some things together, that she knows this is where Luke lives because she slept with him. And as Luke and the landlady emerge from the rubble, Misty is there as well as the press, and Luke starts to kind of walk away after getting a brief checkup from the doctors, and the press is sort of dogged, and he turns around and he introduces himself to the camera, and that's how this ends.
もうどうにも止まらない全方向スクロールミュータントバトルアクション X-Men Children of the Atom サターンで新登場カプコン
Begin sequencing nanotechnology. Microscopic robots are syncing up. Mask with infrared lens and database. Ready. Testing wide web. Check. Impact web. Check. Utilize stingers. Check. Deploy tracer. Employ stealth mode. Danger. Go to shift mode. Simulation of new features to combat alien aggression complete.
Transforming beyond all bounds. Spider-Man Unlimited premiering this Saturday morning on Fox WB 55.
Okay, this is episode 3 of Iron Fist, Rolling Thunder Cannon Punch. We get Colleen Wing getting a visit from a group of thugs from the Rand Corporation again, and they inform her that Danny escaped from the mental asylum he was being held at. It turns out that Danny's actually been there the whole time. Colleen bluffs away, but she says, you gotta leave in the morning. Bluffs the bad people away, actually. At this point, Harold sort of we go back to the Meachums, and Harold chastises Ward for basically bungling things with Danny. Danny was supposed to be transferred away, not an attempted killing, which is what happened, and because of that he escaped. We then return back to the dojo where Danny and Colleen engage in a brief sparring session. He shows her a special punch that really, really hurts. At this point, though, again, she's still kind of saying, like, look, you got to get out. You're not really safe. No one's really safe here right now. And he basically makes an offer. He says, look, you can let me stay here if I can pay your at least 6 months of your rent. And he says, okay. So at this point, he starts initiating the legal actions to try to get back control of what's his. Joy and Ward basically offer him a deal. He gets, I think it was $140 million, but he has to change his name. Exactly. The world has to think that Danny Rand is dead. They can't, you can't be creating this much attention onto yourself. He basically says no. Along this time, too, he sort of explains to Joy the encounter he had with Harold Meachum, believing him to be a drug-induced hallucination that he called a wandering ghost. Anyway, after another confrontation with Joy and the whole name thing, Danny goes to visit Jerry Hogarth, who is the lawyer who is a prominent character in Jessica Jones. She's part of the law firm that will often hire Jessica to utilize her services. She's played by Carrie-Anne Moss, obviously. As this is happening, it turns out that she interned for Rand Industries and was a particular favorite of Danny's father and knows Danny, so she agrees to represent him in attempting to regain Rand Industries pro bono as long as her law firm gets exclusive, basically legal rights from there on out. At this point, the Hand pays a visit to Harold Meachum. He tells him, look, I had to leave because this guy's come back saying he's Danny Rand, and I needed to verify that this was the case. I can't tell you that this is Danny Rand, and they kind of said, okay, so this might throw a wrench into certain things, and that's kind of about it. They then make him kneel into... basically, he was trying to get a drink as this happened. He dropped the glass on the floor, and the Hand make him kneel with his hands right down into the broken glass. And a little bit later, let me see here. A little bit later, Ward kind of confronts Harold over certain things, and Harold basically says, "Look, you don't really want to mess with the Hand. Just it's best for you to stay out of this at this point." Anyway, back with Jerry Hogarth and Danny Rand, she's having some problems trying to prove that Danny is Danny. I mean, did he have any other points other than the DNA test? Is there any other way that they could prove it that could be shown in court without having to, basically prove leverage so that they don't have to go to court? Danny thinks to get a picture of an old x-ray he had as a child where he broke his arm. He goes to the hospital and he gets jumped by one of Meacham's goons. And the records area is subsequently destroyed in an explosion because the guy was there to destroy everything. Danny goes to confront Ward and Joy. At this point, Joy tells Danny that they don't really want him there, that he needs to just go leave them alone. And basically this kind of upsets her a little bit. Upsets Joy a little bit. She later tells Ward about Danny saying that he met Harold at one point. And then she returns home and she finds this little like pottery piece sitting on her end table at one point. And it turns out that she sort of covertly sends this to Jerry Hogarth because it turns out Danny made this as a present for her when he was like 5 or 6 years old, and his fingerprints are all over this thing because it was a pottery piece. Of course, thanks to Adam Ruins Everything, you know that everyone would know that fingerprint evidence has been pretty much debunked. The idea that everyone has their own individual set of fingerprints is not true. It's actually a real misnomer. But anyway, this is enough leverage to basically throw the case into a bit more of a whack. They don't agree to anything right off the bat. But after another encounter, Danny tails Ward to Harold's hiding place. Danny tries to scale the outside, brief spot of the outside of the building to peek in through the window when someone knocks him from it and he begins to fall. Okay, this leads into episode 4, 8 Diagram Dragon Punch. Danny falls onto a small ledge of the building. Ward finds Danny and brings him inside. It turns out that yes, Ward was the one who knocked him off because he thought he was trying to break in. Exactly. It's at this point that Harold reveals himself, and Harold explains that yes, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I was dying. It was then that the Hand approached me and basically offered a chance to cure the cancer, but I had to very briefly die, and then 3 days later I was resurrected. Also, the Hand has infiltrated most of Rand Industries, and when Harold found out that Danny as the Iron Fist is meant to take down the Hand, he knows that this means that they have to work together, that this needs to come back and work together. So Danny is allowed his inheritance. He gets 51% of Rand Industries, which, for those of you who don't know, doesn't mean anything. Owning 51% of a company does not guarantee you anything. If you want a controlling interest, you actually have to own 66 or 2/3 of the company, not just 51%. Anyway, basically as they leave, Ward kind of gives a message saying, look, Harold's still primarily focused on benefiting Harold. Don't think that he's like some long-lost family member. Anyway, Danny, they hold a press conference. Danny basically talks about, look, I was raised in a monastery. This is why I survived, but I vanished because I was just held in this monastery for so long that it took a while for word to get out. He doesn't mention the Iron Fist at all. He then kind of rubs some elbows the wrong way, where, he rubs some elbows the wrong way concerning prices over a drug treatment in impoverished nations, and that's kind of how that sort of falls. But if this happens, Danny afterwards kind of goes out with Joy. He talks to her about a lot of the physical trials he endured while living at the monastery, that in order to fit in, he had to go through a lot of beatings. He does not mention the Iron Fist once more. But this is when they get interrupted in Joy, as there's an attempted kidnapping by a group of Chinese mafia triads, basically. Danny winds up using the Iron Fist in front of Joy a little bit and fighting them off. He then takes it back to Colleen Wing, and yeah, I know I've skipped over one of Colleen Wing's subplots, which is in order to help pay for her dojo, she's been competing in an underground fighting circuit. But Danny doesn't pass much judgment on it and said, look, I've had to do that too, so I'm not holding that against you at all. So, but anyway, she directs them to where the triads are headquartered. Danny mentions the Hand, and immediately the triads kind of like, oh, okay, well, we'll leave you alone. But as this is happening, Harold Meacham himself actually gets taken by the Hand. They take him back to Joy's home, where he sees her and he sees the bruises, and they explain like, oh, well, it was the triads who did this. And so Harold basically joins the Hand temporarily so he could kill the man who struck Joy. And that's pretty much how this ends.
Magneto has arrived. Only in X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Now 2 can play the most mutant heroes. And Magneto. Marvel's X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Hardware and game cartridge, each sold separately.
They're the ultimate team of superheroes, an elite brigade sworn to fight crimes of mass destruction. They are the Avengers. And if you think you've got what it takes to become one, think again.
You don't just join. The team has to decide.
Tigra, part woman, part tiger, giving her incredible athletic ability and cat-like reflexes.
The harder they are, the bigger they fall.
The Vision, an artificial synthesoid being. Special powers can change his density to be light as a feather or heavy as 40 tons.
Your weapons are useless.
The Scarlet Witch, a gypsy mutant who casts fate-changing hexes.
Demons of destiny, change!
Wonder Man, all-around good guy possessing powers too secret to tell.
Got you covered, Hawk. You want to be one of us, huh? Better guys than you have tried to become an Avenger and failed.
Find out if you got what it takes when you catch the Avengers. Next Saturday morning with an all-new episode at 10:30, only on Fox Kids.
Okay, overall thoughts. Well, starting with Luke Cage, we have kind of a weird scenario here where we have back-to-back flashback episodes, basically. And that's not something one normally does in TV. They usually try to space those out and have a little bit of a time to let other characters grow a little bit. I mean, they did a good job of starting the supporting cast in this, but again, it's like, really, the first episode did not need to be told in flashback. You could have easily just had it happen without the little beginning bit where you see the outside of the attic center as Luke is wreaking havoc inside. And then later you see Luke actually wreaking the havoc inside. But other than that, like I said, that just kind of left me feeling a little odd. But other than that, I mean, it's been enjoyable. The second episode, where with the origin story, I kind of wish this had maybe happened a little bit later. I mean, I guess you weren't going to be able to tell the origin at any other point. I mean, you needed the setup of Luke and the landlady being trapped in the rubble for him to flash back over it. But yeah, it just kind of still feels a little out of place. Other than that, though, I'm still interested and looking forward to more of it. Okay, so now on to Iron Fist. Well, can at least say things finally started happening. I mean, we're not getting dogged by this whole Danny Rand having to prove who he is anymore. I mean, that's taken care of. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the interest lies. Here's the thing. I don't know if I mentioned this in the first part or not. Danny Rand is clearly the least interesting part of Iron Fist. Pretty much all of the supporting cast is a little bit more interesting. Like, Danny starts to get interesting, and then suddenly it just stops because something comes along to interrupt that. And I think now that, again, he's through this whole I don't have to prove I am alive anymore bit, maybe there could be a little bit more development for him. That being said, not all the subplot, like Colleen Wing at one point was the most interesting, but again, her underground fighting circuit thing just, it falls a little flat. It just, yeah, it left me lacking. Probably Harold Meacham is the most interesting character in my opinion. Ward and Joy can be interesting at times. Unfortunately, there's also a weird thing going on with Ward where he seems to have a unnatural attraction to his sister. I don't know where it's necessarily meant to go or if that's even meant to be, but yeah, it does feel a little But at least in this case, maybe things can actually start to happen now that this whole origin arc. This is where I actually think an origin story would have served to have the origin maybe covered over the first couple episodes where they didn't really do that. I really wish they, like there's a little bit of it. There was him wandering around in the wreckage of the plane and the monks discovering him, but other than that, there hasn't been anything close to that, and I really wish there were. I think that would have helped pick this series up a little bit. Anyway, the next video is going to be the NXT TakeOver Philadelphia. After that will be the Royal Rumble recap and review, and then I'll try to see if I can get part 3 of this Netflix recap thing up and going a little bit sooner. See you all next time. Hey guys, is there a movie you want me to tackle? If it's some stinker like Baywatch or the Emoji Movie or something else? Check out my Patreon at Sleepy Time for Cat Productions. See how you can make that happen.